Story 1.
The morning I crossed into Silent Pines National Park, dawn broke with an unusual clarity. The sun, just lifting above the horizon, spilled light across the ground, revealing the park in the grip of winter's end. It felt like waking from a dream into another, where the chill in the air hinted at lingering secrets. I'd traveled a long way, both in distance and dreams, to stand here. As a kid, I'd lived in books of wilderness and myth, always imagining myself in the heart of untold adventures. Now, as I stepped through the park's entrance, a newly minted ranger, those childhood fantasies felt like they were merging with reality. The sign at the entrance, Silent Pines National Park, was simple, carved into wood that had weathered countless seasons. Beyond it, the gravel road snaked deeper into the forest, flanked by the towering presence of trees that felt ancient. I took a deep breath, the air crisp, filled with the scent of pine and a hint of snow. It was a smell that whispered of deep forests and untold stories. Driving along, I was captivated by the light filtering through the dense branches, creating patterns on the ground that shifted with the wind. It was beautiful, almost mesmerizing, a display of natural artistry that bordered on the spiritual. I felt an immediate deep connection to the land, a sense of belonging that had eluded me until now. My first weeks were dedicated to learning the park, its trails, its inhabitants. I walked the paths, absorbing the silence, the beauty of the snow-draped pines, the clear streams cutting through the landscape, and the valleys hidden from time. The deer, the squirrels, even the occasional fox or raccoon added life to the stillness, each sighting a quiet thrill. Despite the beauty and serenity of the park, there was something more to it. It was the mystery of the wilderness that attracted me to the role of a ranger. I began to delve into the history of Silent Pines, studying old maps and records, talking with local residents living on the outskirts of the park. They talked about this land with reverence, sharing stories about ancient spirits and legends of the forest. My curiosity was piqued by stories about the times when the park was considered the domain of creatures from myths and legends. Although I was skeptical about these stories, I could not deny the attraction of the unknown, the charm of secrets waiting to be revealed. And it was during one of my early morning patrols, when the first rays of dawn colored the sky in pink and gold tones, that I came across the first sign that something unusual was really hidden in the forest. I had set out at dawn, the air fresh with the scent of pine and the earthy aroma of the forest floor, still damp from the night's chill. My route took me through a section of the park less frequented by visitors, a dense thicket that bordered one of the many streams that crisscrossed the land. As I approached the stream, the sound of running water mingling with the morning calls of birds, I noticed something unusual. At the water's edge, partially hidden by a clump of ferns, lay the body of a deer. From a distance, it appeared as though the animal might be resting. But as I drew closer, the true nature of the scene before me became apparent. The deer had been brutally attacked, its injuries severe and unlike any predator attack I had encountered before in my career. The precision of the wounds suggested intelligence, a disturbing thought that sent a shiver down my spine. I knelt beside the animal, my mind racing with questions. What kind of creature could have done this? And why did it feel like this was more than a simple act of predation? Determined to find answers, I documented the scene with meticulous care, taking photographs and notes that I hoped might later offer some insight. The rest of my patrol passed in a haze of contemplation, the beauty of the park now shadowed by the violence of what I had found. Back at the ranger station, I shared my findings with the team, expecting concern, perhaps even a sense of urgency. To my surprise, the reaction was muted. Seasoned rangers spoke of the occasional rogue predator, suggesting a bear or a mountain lion might be responsible. Despite their reassurances, I couldn't shake the feeling that what I had witnessed was something entirely different. In the days that followed, my patrols were marked by a heightened sense of vigilance. I found myself scanning the underbrush, listening for any sound out of place, the weight of uncertainty a constant companion. It wasn't long before I discovered another victim, this time a raccoon, its condition mirroring that of the deer in its violence. The pattern of attacks, growing in frequency and brutality, became impossible to ignore. Each discovery added to a growing dossier of incidents that seemed to point to a predator unlike any Silent Pines had known. Conversations with my fellow rangers became a study in frustration. Where I saw a mystery that needed solving, they saw only the harsh realities of nature. Feeling increasingly isolated in my concern, I turned to the park's extensive library of wildlife reports and research, hoping to find anything that might shed light on the situation. Nights stretched long as I pored over documents, the glow of my desk lamp a solitary beacon in the dark. It was during one of these late-night sessions that Sarah found me, her presence a welcome interruption to the solitary task. A botanist with an uncanny ability to read the language of the forest, she had noticed the same unease that had taken root in my thoughts. "Still chasing shadows, Mark?" she asked, her voice tinged with a mix of concern and curiosity. "I'm not sure what I'm chasing," I admitted, gesturing to the scattered reports on my desk. "But there's something out there, something that doesn't fit with any patterns we know." Sarah pulled up a chair. Her interest piqued. Together we revisited the evidence, the photographs and notes painting a grim picture of the unknown threat. It was Sarah who first suggested we look beyond the conventional explanations to consider the possibility of something more. "Have you ever heard the old stories?" she asked, her voice lowering as if to keep the secrets of the park. "Legends of creatures that roam these lands, guardians of the forest or spirits of the wild." I had of course heard snippets of folklore, tales told around campfires to spook the unwary. But to consider them as anything more than stories felt like a leap into the absurd. Yet faced with the inexplicable, the idea of looking to the past for answers held a certain appeal. Our conversation stretched into the early hours, theories forming and dissolving in the shared pursuit of understanding. It was a partnership born of necessity, a mutual recognition that the mystery of the attacks was something neither of us could solve alone. After discovering evidence of unusual attacks in Silent Pines, Sarah and I knew we had to delve deeper into the park's mysteries. The early stories about creatures of legend now seemed more relevant than ever. Our plan was to gather as much information as possible, both from the park's archives and from any locals with knowledge of its deeper secrets. We dedicated several days to researching at the local library, hoping to find historical records or personal accounts that might shed light on the recent incidents. The library, located near the park's administrative office, became our temporary base of operations. There, amidst rows of aging books and dusty shelves, we found old newspaper clippings and ranger logs that documented past encounters with wildlife and detailed the geography of the park's more remote areas. One particular log, dating back over 50 years, caught our attention. It contained detailed notes from a ranger who had reported seeing shadows that moved with purpose, far from any known animal paths. These shadows, the ranger speculated, might be guardians of the forest, a theory that seemed to align with the stories we had heard. With this new information, we plotted out the locations of the recent attacks on a map of Silent Pines. a pattern emerged, suggesting that these incidents were concentrated in a specific area of the park. This area was known for its dense forests and rugged terrain, making it less accessible and rarely visited by hikers. Determined to explore this area ourselves, we prepared for an overnight expedition. We packed our gear carefully, including cameras, flashlights, and enough supplies to last us through the night. Our goal was to observe any unusual activity and, if possible, gather evidence that could explain what was happening in Silent Pines. The expedition led us deep into the heart of the park. As we hiked, the familiar sounds of the forest accompanied us, but there was an undercurrent of tension, knowing that we might be close to uncovering something extraordinary. Night fell, and the forest transformed. The sounds of nocturnal creatures filled the air, a reminder that we were not alone. Hours passed without any sign of the mysterious shadows mentioned in the ranger's log. Just when it seemed our search might be in vain, we heard a rustling in the underbrush near our campsite. Grabbing our flashlights, we scanned the area. For a moment, there was nothing but the dense foliage and the night. Then we saw it, a pair of reflective eyes watching us from the darkness. We held our breath, hoping for a closer look, but the creature vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Though we didn't get the evidence we had hoped for, the encounter was a confirmation that there was something out there, something that wasn't just an ordinary predator. We returned to the ranger station the next day with more questions than answers, but resolved to continue our investigation. In the following weeks, Sarah and I went through every piece of information we could find, piecing together the history of Silent Pines and its legends. We interviewed longtime residents, combed through archival materials, and spent countless hours in the field, trying to connect the dots. The northern woods of Silent Pines were a world apart, a vast expanse of wilderness that stretched beyond the horizon, untouched and untamed. This part of the park was seldom visited by campers or hikers, its dense foliage and rugged terrain deterring all but the most adventurous or foolhardy. It was here, amid the ancient trees and whispering winds, that I sought answers to the mystery that had gripped the park. The day began with the first light of dawn, the sun casting a golden glow through the towering pines, their shadows long and foreboding on the forest floor. I had packed the essentials: water, food, a first aid kit, and most importantly, my camera and notebook. The latter had become my constant companions, tools in my quest to unravel the truth behind the brutal attacks that had unsettled the peace of Silent Pines. As I ventured deeper into the northern sector, the signs of human presence faded away, replaced by the untamed beauty of nature. The path, barely visible under the thick underbrush, wound its way through the heart of the forest. Every step took me further from the world I knew, deeper into a realm where the rules of man had no dominion. The air was cool, filled with the scent of pine and the earthy aroma of the forest floor. Birdsong filled the air, a melodic counterpoint to the crunch of my boots on the path. Despite the beauty of the scene, a sense of unease settled over me, a palpable tension that seemed to emanate from the trees themselves. It was as if the forest was watching, waiting. I had been walking for several hours when I first noticed the signs. It began with a subtle shift in the air, a sudden silence that fell over the forest. The birds had stopped singing, the gentle rustle of leaves and branches ceasing as if nature itself had paused to draw a breath. Then came the tracks, unlike any I had seen before. They were fresh, the imprints clear in the soft earth of the path, too large for a deer, too irregular for a bear. The realization sent a chill down my spine. I was not alone. Something was out there, something large, and, if the stories were to be believed, dangerous. With a mixture of trepidation and determination, I followed the tracks, my camera at the ready. They led me off the path, through a thicket of brambles that scratched at my arms and face, drawing blood. But the pain was a distant concern, my focus fixed on the trail before me. The tracks led to a clearing, a natural hollow surrounded by dense trees. The sunlight filtered through the canopy above, casting dappled shadows on the ground. And there, at the far end of the clearing, was the den. It was a crude structure, built against the base of a large boulder. Branches and foliage had been artfully arranged to conceal the entrance, the work of intelligent hands. My heart raced as I approached, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. But I couldn't. I needed to know. The entrance to the den was low, forcing me to crouch as I peered inside. The interior was dark, the air cool and damp. I could see the outlines of a makeshift bed, a pile of leaves and moss in one corner. Scattered around were the remnants of meals past, bones picked clean of meat, some unmistakably human. I took a step back, my mind reeling from the implications. This was no bear's den. The intelligence behind its construction, the evidence of its inhabitants' diet, all pointed to one conclusion. The legends were true. Silent Pines was home to something far more sinister than any natural predator. The sound of a branch snapping behind me shattered the silence, my heart leaping into my throat. I spun around, camera raised, only to find myself alone. The forest had reclaimed its stillness, the momentary panic fading as the realization set in. I had found what I was looking for, but now the hunt was on in earnest. Whatever called this den home, it was smart, elusive, and, most importantly, it was watching me. Determined to seek answers, I equipped myself with more than just the essentials for survival and observation. I carried a digital recorder, hoping to capture any sounds or evidence, and a night vision camera to pierce the darkness that shrouded the forest at night. My goal was clear: to observe and document, not to confront. The following weeks were marked by a meticulous pattern of tracking and waiting. I mapped out the areas around the den, setting up motion-sensitive cameras at strategic points. Each evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I would settle into my hiding spot, a camouflaged tent set up at a safe distance from the clearing. The waiting was a test of patience and resolve. The forest, a cacophony of sounds that played tricks on my mind. One night, under the cloak of a new moon, the forest fell eerily silent. It was a silence that preceded something momentous. Peering through my binoculars, I scanned the clearing, my breath caught in anticipation. That's when I saw it, a figure emerging from the shadows, its movements graceful yet deliberate. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. Standing on two legs, its form was shrouded in the darkness, but the outline was unmistakable. A creature of substantial size, its features humanoid, yet distinctly animalistic. My hand trembled as I lifted the night vision camera, recording the moment with a sense of awe and fear. The creature paused at the edge of the clearing, tilting its head as if sensing my presence. My heart pounded in my chest, the realization dawning on me that I was no longer the observer, but the observed. The roles had reversed, and I was now the intruder in its domain. For long minutes, we remained in a standoff, neither of us moving. Then, with a grace that belied its size, the creature turned and disappeared into the forest. The encounter lasted only minutes, but it felt like an eternity. I was left with a recording that would change everything, tangible proof of the unbelievable. The moment of truth came with a disheartening revelation. When I eagerly watched the footage from the cameras, the screen came to life, but only to display static or, worse, completely blank images. Hours of footage, or what should have been hours of footage, captured nothing but the empty, undisturbed forest night after night. It was a setback I hadn't anticipated. The technology I'd relied on, which I had hoped would unveil the secrets of Silent Pines, had failed me at the crucial moment. The creature, with its unnerving intelligence, had either avoided the cameras altogether or, I feared, somehow disabled them. The frustration was palpable, a bitter pill swallowed in the silence of the ranger station. Sarah, ever the voice of reason, suggested interference or a technical glitch could be to blame, but deep down, I knew it was more than mere coincidence or failure of equipment. It was as if the forest itself conspired to keep its secrets, protecting the mystery that lay within its heart. Determined not to be deterred, I resolved to return to the forest. This time, I would not rely on cameras or remote sensors. I needed to witness the creature again, to gather evidence with my own eyes and ears. It was a daunting task, the thought of venturing back into the domain of such a formidable presence. Yet the need for answers, for understanding, outweighed the fear and uncertainty. Preparations for the second expedition were made with careful consideration. I packed lightly, opting for mobility over comfort. A high-definition camera, its memory wiped clean and battery fully charged, would be my only companion, alongside a handheld recorder and a powerful flashlight. This time, I would venture deeper into the forest, beyond the den, into the areas where the attacks had been most frequent. The journey back into the wilderness of Silent Pines was marked by a sense of déjà vu, the familiar paths and landmarks greeting me like old adversaries. The air, however, carried a different charge, a tension that seemed to whisper of unseen watchers and hidden dangers. I pushed forward, driven by a mix of determination and the adrenaline of the hunt. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows that danced between the ancient trees, I felt the isolation of the forest more acutely than ever. The beauty of Silent Pines, with its towering pines and undisturbed clearings, took on a more sinister aspect as dusk approached. Every rustle in the underbrush, every snap of a twig underfoot, heightened the anticipation of what lay ahead. Nightfall enveloped the forest in darkness, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the blackness like a beacon. The deeper I ventured, the more the forest seemed to close in around me, the silence punctuated by the occasional distant howl or the eerie hoot of an owl. Then, just as the weight of the night began to press down upon me, I saw it, a fleeting shadow, moving with purpose through the trees. I raised my camera, the infrared mode cutting through the darkness, and followed. The chase was on, a game of cat and mouse through the dense forest, each step taking me further from safety and deeper into the unknown. The creature moved with a grace that belied its size, its path leading me to a part of the park I had never ventured into before. The terrain became rougher, the vegetation denser, until at last I found myself at the edge of a clearing I had never seen on any map. And there, in the center of the clearing, illuminated by the moonlight that filtered through the canopy above, I saw them, not one, but a group of creatures gathered as if in council. They were like the one I had encountered before, but varied in size and features, a family united in the moonlit glade. I dared not move, barely breathed, as I recorded the scene before me. It was a moment of revelation, the discovery of a lifetime. These were the guardians of Silent Pines, the beings of legend made flesh. In their presence, I felt an overwhelming sense of awe and a profound realization of the true nature of the wilderness. The recording continued, every detail captured in the silent vigil of the night. This time, there would be no malfunction, no failure. The evidence was irrefutable, a testament to the mysteries that lay hidden in the heart of Silent Pines. As the creatures eventually dispersed, melting back into the forest from which they had come, I remained. The first light of dawn found me still in the clearing, the camera's memory full, my own mind overflowing with wonder and questions. The journey back to the ranger station was a blur, my steps hastened by the urgency of my discovery. The footage I had captured would change everything, challenging our understanding of the natural world and our place within it. But as I emerged from the forest, the first rays of the sun warming the chill of the night from my bones, I realized that some mysteries were not meant to be solved. Silent Pines had revealed its secret to me, not as a challenge to be conquered, but as a trust to be kept. In the days that followed, Sarah and I watched the footage in silence, the images on the screen speaking more eloquently than words ever could. We knew that what we had witnessed was a gift, a glimpse into a world that existed alongside our own, yet apart. The decision was made without the need for discussion. The footage will remain confidential, a secret. I decided to delete everything. Silent Pines would continue to be a sanctuary, its mysteries preserved for generations to come. As for me, my journey had come full circle. The child who had dreamed of adventures in the wild had found his adventure, not in the pages of a book, but in the living, breathing heart of the forest. Silent Pines had become not just a place of duty, but a home, a part of my soul where the legends of old danced among the shadows, guardians of a world that remained wild, free, and undisturbed.
Story 2. It's been a decade since I first stepped foot in Greenleaf National Park as its head ranger. The lush foliage, the centuries-old trees, the bubbling brooks, and thriving wildlife. I love it all. I've devoted every single day of these past 10 years to protect this magnificent patch of earth that, over time, has felt more like home than any house I've lived in. But now, things have begun to change, and not in a way I can explain. I remember vividly the day when my assistant of many years, Jerry, left his post due to a heart condition. His grizzled face softened by sorrow, his eyes moist. This park was as much a part of him as it was of me. His departure meant a new assistant was due, a man named Tom. I didn't know anything about Tom, but anyone willing to work in the wilderness was okay in my books, or so I thought. When Tom arrived, the park was in the thick of summer. Families were swarming the campsites, children laughing and scampering around like woodland creatures. Tom was quiet, but efficient. He took to his duties with a sober dedication that I admired. The first few weeks passed smoothly. The park thrived in its sunlit glory, and Tom fell into the rhythm of the place. However, the calm didn't last. The first incident was a couple of dead squirrels near the Eastern Trail. I thought nothing of it initially. Nature is, after all, a brutal cycle of life and death. Then, one early morning, I discovered a mutilated raccoon. I've never seen an animal attack like this, I confessed to Tom, who merely shrugged in response, his eyes averted from the grisly sight. With the passing days, the corpses of animals began to multiply, growing more grotesque and larger. A torn-apart deer, a bear cub cut into pieces. Each discovery twisted my stomach into a knot, causing me to worry about my park. "We have to do something, Tom," I insisted. "We can't just ignore this." He agreed, and we began to set traps, monitor the trails more intensively, alert the visitors to be cautious. I contacted the authorities, but their disinterest was palpable. "It's probably just a rogue bear, Michael. These things happen," they said. I wish it were that simple. Then, the disappearances started. The first were a group of college students who ventured into the deeper trails for a camping trip. They never returned. The search parties yielded nothing. The eeriness started settling deeper into my bones when a young married couple vanished without a trace, leaving behind a half-eaten meal at their campsite. The park was no longer a place of peace. It was a breeding ground for fear. I tried to unravel the mystery, plunging deeper into the park than I'd ever been before. The whispers among the park staff grew louder, and so did the nightmares. Shadowy figures lurking behind trees, eerie howls that weren't from any known animal. The feeling of being watched. My once serene haven was now filled with unnamed horrors. "Something is wrong here, Tom," I told him one evening as we sat by the ranger station, the forest a dark silhouette against the night sky. "It's not just some rogue animal. We're dealing with something different." "Different how?" Tom asked, his gaze finally meeting mine. "I don't know. Yet," I confessed. a chill running down my spine as the wind howled through the desolate park. I could only hope we'd find out before it was too late. I found the place by accident. It was tucked away in a remote corner of the park where few ever ventured. The clearing was lined with a crude stone circle, symbols etched onto the stones, covered in a dry, flaky substance that looked a lot like blood. My heart pounded in my chest as I traced the symbols with my fingers, the eerie familiarity of them sending a shiver down my spine. Strewn about the clearing were items, personal belongings, clothing, and body parts. An arm here, a leg there, and in the center, a skull. Eyes still intact, staring up at the sky in silent horror. My mind raced back to the missing campers, the young couple. Were these theirs? Were they victims of some horrific, twisted ritual? Was this the work of cultists? A maniac? The thought filled me with dread. I reported my findings to the police, my hands shaking as I dialed the number. The park had been turned into a hunting ground by some madman. Detective Brad, the head of the case, listened in silence, his tone grave. "Michael, first of all, I'm sorry I didn't listen to you right away when you asked for help. I know I got involved after the hikers disappeared, but what I found out makes me worried. I haven't figured it all out yet, and I have questions, a lot of weird questions, but..." He finally spoke, his voice heavy. "Michael, for now, keep an eye on your assistant, Tom." I felt my blood run cold. "Tom? Why?" "I don't have concrete proof yet," Brad admitted, "but some things aren't adding up about him. Just watch him. Be careful." The line went dead, leaving me with my thoughts. Tom. Could he really be involved in all this? In the days that followed, I observed Tom more closely. His mannerisms, his routines. I found myself watching him for any signs of deceit. He seemed the same, dedicated and quiet, yet doubt gnawed at me. One evening, as Tom ventured deeper into the woods, I made my move. Using my spare key, I entered his cabin. I told myself it was necessary, that it was to find the truth. His belongings were ordinary: clothes, books, a toothbrush. Then I stumbled upon a worn, leather-bound book tucked away in his drawer. The symbols on the cover matched those I had found in the clearing. A cold realization swept over me as I flipped through its pages. Diagrams of rituals, detailed notes, cryptic messages. It was all there. Underneath the book, I found an ID. The face on the card was not the Tom I knew. The name read Tom Bennett, but the face was that of a stranger. A pang of betrayal washed over me. This man was not Tom. He was an imposter, a murderer masquerading in a stolen identity. I ran back to my cabin, my mind a whirl of thoughts and fears. I picked up the phone and dialed Brad's number. I spilled everything in hurried, anxious sentences. There was silence at the other end, then a deep sigh. "Michael, lock your doors and stay put. We're coming." When the cops arrived, their presence brought a momentary relief. Their stern faces and loaded weapons filled me with a sense of hope. Perhaps we could end this nightmare. Brad, a few cops, and I prepared to venture into the heart of the park. As we headed deeper into the forest, I felt an unsettling change. The air was colder, heavier, as if carrying the weight of a hidden terror. Even the trees seemed darker, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. Brad and I took the lead, our footsteps muffled by the underbrush. The rest of the police force scattered throughout the rest of the park. Then came the gunshots, shattering the eerie silence. I jerked around, my heart pounding in my chest. Screams followed, a symphony of terror resonating through the woods. "West, west, something big, shadow, I can't..." The radio hissed with static, the words of the officer from the west barely discernible. His sentence was cut short by a scream and a growl that curdled my blood. Without a word, Brad and I moved towards the west, the chilling echoes of the screams guiding our path. The forest, once a safe haven, now loomed ominously, the shadows seeming to grow and twist with each passing second. The scene we stumbled upon was grotesque. Pieces of human bodies littered the ground and hung from the trees, torn apart by something ferocious. The sight threatened to bring my dinner back up, the metallic scent of blood overwhelming. "Brad, we need to get out of here," I said, my voice shaking. He nodded, his face pale as he reached for his radio. "All officers, retreat. I repeat, retreat now." No response came. The radio crackled ominously in the deafening silence. He tried again and again, but it was as if we were the last people left in the world. Realization struck me like a sledgehammer, my heart pounding in sync with the terror coursing through my veins. The officers, my friends, were dead. It was only Brad and me. And somewhere out there was the false Tom, the man behind the ritualistic killings. But there was also something else. Something monstrous. Something I couldn't fathom. A terror that even the killer himself might fear. The rustling behind us snapped me out of my thoughts. Brad and I turned around in unison to find ourselves facing a grotesque sight. It was massive, covered in shaggy fur, its long arms ending in razor-sharp claws. The creature's face was obscured by hair, but there was no missing the oversized jaws filled with teeth that looked like they could chew through metal. The horrifying sight of the creature was made all the more abhorrent by the figure protruding from its back. The false Tom, twisted and deformed, was growing out of the beast, his face twisted into a malevolent grin. I was rooted to the spot, my body refusing to obey my commands. Brad, to his credit, immediately pulled out his weapon and began firing. The creature dodged with ease, charging towards us with a bone-chilling roar. "Run, Michael!" Brad ordered, stepping in between me and the monster. It was his command that finally unfroze me. I turned and ran, the deafening sound of gunshots and the monster's roar echoing in my ears. I'm no hero. Fear drove me, pumping adrenaline through my veins as I sprinted towards my cabin. Fumbling with my keys, I managed to get inside my pickup and ignite the engine. As I drove towards town, I dared a glance at my rearview mirror. There he was, the false Tom. He was back in his human form, grinning madly, waving as if saying goodbye. The night was a blur of panic and phone calls, of reinforcements and a sense of impending doom. Local hunters, volunteers, and additional cops flooded Greenleaf Park, their torches flickering like stars against the enveloping darkness. We found remnants of the carnage, the detective's badge, pieces of what used to be my friends. But of the monster and the false Tom, there was no trace. The woods felt different, lighter perhaps, but not devoid of that feeling of being watched. The story spread quickly, turning into legend. They say that the shaggy monster with a man growing from its back still roams the woods. Some claim to have seen it lurking among the trees. As for me, I can't shake off the feeling that the creature is still there.